I have said it before, I've said it again, and I will say it especially after the Twitter wars that I was engaged in with Tennessee fans after I put forth the opinion that Logan Marchi, the ETSU quarterback, was better than Jared Guarantano. But Caleb Calhoun of AllForTennessee.com is, I think, one of the true journalists covering Tennessee sports. He writes for AllForTennessee.com. It's on the Fansided Network, and yeah, there may be some fanboy writers there, but he's a reporter with USA Today, and he's got some journalistic ethics. He joins me now, Caleb Calhoun of AllForTennessee.com. It's nice to break the losing streak of 4 games by 3 or more touchdowns. It's really nice to hand your opponent the second worst loss that they have ever suffered in their history. But what, if anything, could you take away from the Vols' 59-3 victory against ETSU on Saturday, Caleb Calhoun?
Well, I personally could take away very little, mainly because the biggest strength of what happened on Saturday is something we know to be one of Tennessee's biggest weaknesses, which was the secondary played lights out. And so I just think that was much more about ETSU receivers unable to get open or any type of separation whatsoever than Tennessee's quarterbacks, because we watched what happened the first week in West Virginia. We watched what happened dating back to spring practice last year to know that Tennessee's secondary is going to be awful. The biggest thing I could take away is that Jeremy Pruitt clearly likes playing his guy, some of his recruits. We saw Bryce Thompson get a lot of action, obviously. And the other thing, and I kind of brought this home a lot, is that, Darren Kirkland, inside linebacker, should be a tough transition to the 3, should be a position that's a tough transition to 3-4, but Darren Kirkland has done a pretty good job through 2 games. So as a trend, I would say that Darren Kirkland is probably the most standout player for the Vols over the last 2 weeks.
And he had a pick 6, and yeah, I don't think there's any question that he was probably regarded as the premier defensive player for Tennessee this year, and seems to be stepping up in that regard, at least against ETSU. I don't know if anybody really stepped up against West Virginia, except maybe Tim Jordan or so. But anyhow, the other thing, though, about Bryce Thompson, you mentioned the cornerback, and of course there have been so many questions about the Tennessee secondary. So for Bryce Thompson to be named Freshman of the Week in the SEC over, let's say, anybody really from Georgia, a freshman that might have played in their big victory against South Carolina or so, I mean, that was kind of telling. But do you think that, can Bryce Thompson be a shutdown corner this year is my question. He's only a freshman, but what do you think the limit is for him this season?
I don't know if Bryce Thompson's more of an athlete, so I don't know if I would consider him a shutdown corner. I think Bryce Thompson's strength is range more than it is actually able. Because when I think shutdown, I think you got to be able to kind of jam a guy at the line and stay with him the whole way. And I'm not sure Bryce Thompson will be able to do that. But I think Bryce Thompson has the luxury of kind of striking a bit of fear in quarterbacks in the sense that he can give a lot of range. So I think he can be a tricky guy to go against. And so that's a very big bonus for the Vols. I think he's going to use Thompson and Alante Taylor a lot more going forward for that reason, because all due respect to Baylor Buchanan and Sean Schamberger, those guys, I think they do play hard, but it's tough enough to transition to the 3-4, and they're just not athletic enough to be able to cover a lot of ground, particularly if they get out of position. And I think that's why he's going with the athletes more a lot, is because if you're a guy like Bryce Thompson and you get out of position on the play, you're quick enough to where you might be able to recover, and that's a big deal in this system.
Well, remember this also about Jeremy Pruitt wanting to play his own players. I mean, I think that you're talking to the Tri-Cities here, so just let me give you an ETSU analogy. I think that's a lot about why ETSU is playing the transfer Logan Marchi, who came in from Temple. He's a Randy Sanders, actually more of a Marcus Satterfield, who had a very brief stint as the offensive coordinator at Tennessee, but he had worked with them at Temple as well, or excuse me, at East Tennessee State. Forgive me, with Satterfield. He's now an assistant, an entry-level assistant at Baylor. But nevertheless, that was somebody that the Sanders regime brought in. The quarterback, Austin Herrick, who was the returning starter for his senior year, that wasn't his guy. And so I think, it's no surprise, coaches, if they're not inheriting a very good team, they're going to want to play the players that they find. I don't think there's any question about that. By the way, one thing we keep hearing is sort of like this Juan Jennings under the radar. Do you think that he's going to continue to be under the radar? Or, it would seem to me that he's got to eventually break out if the Vols are going to have any hope of a winning season this year. What are your thoughts right now where Juan Jennings is?
Well, I kind of started to say
Juan Jennings, excuse me, Juan Jennings. Let me pronounce the name right. Sorry, Caleb.
It's okay. Yeah, I started to say, we know this about Juwan, is that when he's fully healthy, he's that type of player that, and there are receivers like this, where they don't show you the best from a raw ability or what you see in practice, but then, the lights come on and there's a big moment and they step up, and Juwan Jennings is that guy. But, I said, kind of starting last year, I think, Marquez Callaway is a little bit shorter than Juwan Jennings, but he's better with the ball in open space.
Mm-hmm.
He is better at jump balls. I know that's crazy to say because Juwan Jennings did have the Hail Mary 2 years ago. But I've seen a little more from, even before Juwan Jennings got hurt, I saw enough flashes from Callaway to believe that he could be better than Jennings. I think that you're right, Jennings is going to have to step up, though, at some point, mainly because without Juwan Jennings, Tennessee really doesn't have a proven game-changer at receiver, and that does matter a lot. But we've seen this before. We saw this with Justin Hunter when he played in Derek Dooley's offense in 2012. There's something about receivers where it seems like they take a year to get fully back into rhythm coming back from injury.
That's intriguing. I'm not sure it's that way in the pros, but it's an intriguing comment right there, Caleb Calhoun. But do you think that there is going to be a quarterback controversy at Tennessee, or has it pretty much been established now that it's going to be Guarantano and Christ, even though he was 3 for 3 for 70 yards? It was in garbage time against a FCS team. No, this is Guarantano's team, and Jarrett Guarantano is going to be the Tennessee quarterback here forth. Do you think that's the case, or is there still some room for Chris to maybe become the starter?
Oh, I think there's plenty of room. You did win me over with your talk about Guarantano being a dinker and a dunker more past week, and I'm not going to give Chris too much credit going 3 for 3, and then that touchdown was the easiest touchdown pass anybody in the world. But I will say that Guarantano, people are forgetting about this, but before the block punt and the weather delay, Tennessee was clinging to a 3-0 lead in that game and couldn't get much offense going. And you got to put some of that on Guarantano. And he completed 8 of 13 passes for 154 yards, but I am starting to come around to where you would expect a little bit more from him against, this was his chance at least against a weak offense to really shine and make at least a few big plays, and he didn't show, it was almost like par for the course managing the offense. And I don't know if, I don't think Tennessee can win like that going forward. If they're going to get lucky in any of these big games they have that they need to get lucky in to try to get to a bowl, they're going to need a little bit more.
I hate to look over UTEP. I will say this is what I took from the ETSU game. Remember last week I said going in after 4 straight losses of 3 touchdowns or more, Caleb Calhoun of allfortennessee.com, I didn't think Tennessee could presume victories over a grade school team, to be honest with you. Oh, yeah, we knew there was only like a 1.5% chance of ETSU winning the game, but they're not in that position. This is not 1998, that sort of thing. And but now the one thing after that lopsided victory against ETSU and the fact that UTEP may be the 130th best Division I college football program in America out of 130, we can look to Florida and ask this. Florida doesn't look to be a very good football team. Just lost to Kentucky, first time since '86. And they've even lost a promising backup running back by the name of Adarius Lemons, who transferred away. Is the Achilles heel potentially for Tennessee going to be their offensive line in the Florida game?
I think that could end up being an issue. If they lose, that will probably be the reason. I think that's why, and I just kind of wrote about this just a little while ago, that when they play UTEP this week, even if it's not really working, they should try to stick to the run game a little bit, just so the line can gel a little bit more. Because that's 2 weeks in a row that they've looked awful. And I know the Brandon Kennedy injury kind of threw them for a loop. I kind of wrote that, they were kind of gelling a little bit more in the second half of West Virginia, and then they lose their starting center, and they have to replace him the next week against UTEP, or against ETSU, but it still wasn't good. And you're right, the offensive line could definitely be an Achilles heel against Florida, probably the biggest one. I will say that, I wasn't, even though I picked Florida, I wasn't shocked about them losing to Kentucky. This kind of, the last weekend pretty much validated my belief that, Georgia's going to coast through the East by default this year. And I don't even think that, I think Georgia is going to lose to Auburn, and I think they get smoked by Alabama this year. They'll be better long term, but the East is just, everybody's rebuilding outside of Missouri, pretty much.
Do you think that makes Missouri the second best team? They got Locke. I thought that South Carolina had a chance. They were at home. They had Sweeney back. Georgia was going to be, their second game. They had a lot of graduation losses, new backfield, all this sort of stuff. And I thought there was a chance for South Carolina to win that game. And obviously they wound up losing by 4 touchdowns, so there wasn't. But, I'm thinking now about Missouri with Drew Lock right there, and the success that they've had when they joined the SEC. Could that be that dark horse team, that one team that could possibly knock off Georgia, which isn't likely to happen? But if there was a team, do you think it's Missouri?
Oh, I'm not saying it yet, but next week I might go all in on that upset. I'm picking Missouri to beat Georgia in Columbia. And you're right, it's because of Drew Lock. In the Georgia secondary, they lost 9 guys on defense, and they have a brand new secondary, and people are really overreacting to what they did to South Carolina, because I said a couple weeks ago that South Carolina was overrated coming into the year. Again, look at who they beat last year en route to that 9-4 record. The most impressive team they beat was Michigan in their bowl game, and everybody knows Michigan phoned that game out. And so I'm still not sold, believe it or not, I'm still not sold on the Muschamp train yet. I know he had a lot of bad situations at Florida, but I think last year was a bit of a fluke.
Okay. No, I understand where you're going. And, Muschamp, although he was getting a lot of positive praise, I'll tell you this, I think that his comments before this year where he was defending DJ Durkin, I think that's going to come back to haunt him. If I'm going Josh Belk, who was a talented defensive lineman that transferred from Clemson to South Carolina aside, if I'm, let's say, the next player out of Irmo, South Carolina, where Bryce Thompson is from, and I'm trying to decide whether to go to wear orange or garnet and black, you have Dabo Sweeney versus coach that backs and defends DJ Durkin. Where do I want to go play football? think about that for a second. So I understand what you're saying there. Then again, Tennessee fans look at Muschamp and they say, well, he's 6-0 against the Vols, that sort of thing. So we shall see right there. Hey, another round. Yes, well, another. I got to ask you this: around the SEC move, David Williams is the athletic director at Vanderbilt. He is resigning as their AD and vice chancellor. He had been there since in that position, I think, for about 15 years or so. Now, normally that would not be of much notice for Tennessee fans in previous generations, but Vandy has now taken 4 of 6 from the Vols and such. Where do you think this goes? I mean, obviously, Vanderbilt seems to be playing better football than they have in years. Made 5 bowl games in 15 years, that sort of thing. Does this have? Do you think that this puts Vandy football right back into the cellar, or do you think that possibly a new AD could come in and say we've got something good going here and go double down on Commodores football, and the Vols would have a legitimate in-state rival? What do you think here?
Yeah, it does depend on who they hire. I think the thing about Vanderbilt that they know, and we kind of saw this with James Franklin. I think they kind of learned who they were as a football program, which is that, I remember that. I remember this with Memphis back in the day with the Tigers. Right after they fired Tommy West, they hired Larry Porter for 2 years, and their big thing was Larry Porter could recruit. And my thoughts are, you're playing in the Conference USA. You're a downtrodden program. I don't think you need to think about recruiting right now. You should probably think about a coach who's going to give you a schematic advantage. And I think Vanderbilt has learned that they can find coaches who will give them a schematic advantage and keep them relevant enough to where if they make enough of a splash, particularly being in the SEC, then it'll be a little bit easier to recruit. And we're seeing that with Derek Mason to a degree. Again, I know he's a little bit on the hot seat, but I think the strength with Vanderbilt is that they've done a better job to a degree of accepting who they are than most schools over the last 15 years. And I feel that could pay dividends for them. We've seen that a lot with schools in the past. I mean, Clemson kind of accepted who they are with Tommy Bowden and then Dabo Swinney, and then they stumbled into Dabo Swinney being a heck of a coach because they stuck it out with him after his hot seat year in 2010.
I was reminded before the ETSU game, because I know that Phil Fulmer turned down ETSU to be their football coach, which I think is direct slap to ETSU as a matter of fact. But remember 11 years ago, he applied for the job at Clemson that they gave to Dabo Swinney. I don't know if you remember that or not. After he got the After he got the axe at, it was 10 years ago, after he got the axe at Tennessee, he applied for Clemson. And, obviously they went with Swinney. I don't think they're regretting that in South Carolina a whole lot, to tell you the truth. But then again, I don't know how many Tennessee fans, they're all excited that, the great coach is now in charge of the program once again. So we'll see how that works out as well. Anyway, Caleb Calhoun, UTEP comes in, also another game against Charlotte. These are really, I understand if you look at how schedules go now in college football, certainly in the SEC, it seems like teams do this. They play the 8 conference games. They have 1 game against an FCS team. They have 1 challenging out-of-conference game. And then they play 2 teams from conferences other than the Power 5. UTEP and Charlotte, though, maybe you couldn't foresee this, maybe you could, that they'd be this bad. But is there any team from not in the Power 5 that you'd like to see Tennessee play? I think Memphis would be a real good yearly series for them to have for recruiting purposes. Is there anybody, do you agree, or would there be somebody else maybe you'd even like to see Tennessee play out of the Power 5?
Oh, yeah, I've always been a fan of the Tennessee-Memphis series, and now knowing that Memphis was a sleeping giant for like a mid-major school that's been awoken now, it would actually be kind of one of those exciting ones. And so, yes, that's a good one. I've always thought, it's tough, particularly with the way the Group of 5 is now versus the way it used to be. I can't really think of any consistent, dominant mid-major programs, with the exception of Boise State, but they're the only ones I can think of that have remained relatively within the Group of 5. I would say for proximity purposes, Tennessee-Cincinnati would be interesting on a yearly basis. But, obviously Tennessee got Butch Jones away from Cincinnati.
Well, I'm thinking half bear, other half cat. I think that's a natural.
There you go. So that would be an interesting one. I'm not crazy. I'm going to be honest. I don't have a problem playing these Group of 5 games. I'm not crazy with 4 out-of-conference games, and 3 of them, though, are cupcakes. And you're you're right. I don't know anybody could have predicted Charlotte and UTEP being this bad when Tennessee scheduled them, but, you look at next year. Tennessee's big out-of-conference game is BYU at home.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm thinking, shouldn't that be like, no disrespect to BYU, but shouldn't that be like one of your second or third tier games? I think it's time the SEC goes to 9 games and
Intriguing.
9 conference games. Get rid of the divisions, by the way, and then you have like 4 or 5 like consistent rivals you play, and then you play to make sure you play every team in the conference at least once every other year.
I don't know if I like get rid of the divisions because I hate what the Big 12 does with 10 teams. And, second place is as good as first. I hate that. And, I know that there's been a disparity in all this. I've often wondered, well, if, the SEC would ever expand again. I mean, we hear about Texas and Oklahoma. That might be a bit of a pipe dream because I think that some of the Tennessee, I think that the schools would say, wait a minute here, this could be really too tough. But, that would allow you to move Missouri over to triple the ACC, would not harm the SEC's football elite, but would certainly improve the SEC as a basketball conference. And so that's, and also the one state really in the South that it doesn't have, Virginia, but, the one state really is North Carolina. And that also, I think, would be, okay, if you're ever going to go that route. The other thing, though, to consider, I'm not sure that there won't be more teams trying to do the BYU independent model. And you may think I'm crazy when I say that, but that allows a program to negotiate their own broadcasting deal and be the team of, let's say, YouTube or Amazon. That could be even more wealthy than joining into a major conference if you have the right people negotiating the contract. College athletics are going to go.
Oh, yeah, it turns everything on its head from, remember 2011, the last realignment, I made my prediction that Virginia Tech and NC State would be the next 2 teams in the SEC, because then you could have 4 divisions with 4 teams in each, and you'd have every team would have a natural rivalry, which would be perfect. Because Missouri and Arkansas, Texas A&M and LSU in one, Alabama, Auburn, Ole Miss, Mississippi State, Florida, Georgia, South Carolina, NC State, and then Tennessee, Vanderbilt, Kentucky, and Virginia Tech. With Tennessee and Virginia Tech being the new natural rivalry. But yeah, I think that was 2011, which was when cable subscriptions peaked, and we know that they've been going downhill ever since with the transition to streaming. I don't know how important TV markets are going to be. Regional TV, I don't know why Texas State's in the Big 12 right now, because they can get a lot more out of being independent. But, if you're one of the major SEC schools, I think it still makes sense right now to be in a conference, because I'm not sure any SEC school right now could corner a market.
I think scheduling is the under, the weird. Well, that's a game. Southern California is going to be a game. I've kind of noticed that Purdue isn't a game for Notre Dame anymore, which I was a little surprised about. But, if they ever wanted to, Purdue would obviously jump at the chance to play, whoever they want to play. Notre Dame scheduling isn't a problem. Although even they are going to play. That's the thing that keeps Texas in a conference, is just they need somebody to play. And, of course, BYU going to Tennessee, that's the thing. And, who knows? It might be something for Tennessee to learn from. Here's a stat for you, Caleb Calhoun of All for Tennessee. The UTEP Miners are 0-21-1 in the Eastern Time Zone lifetime.
I did not know that. That is a stat. That's an interesting stat.
There you are. You would have thought that they would have had, some game over, Mike Price was the coach there for a long time. I know that they just win one game, or something like that. Heck, if they could beat BYU years ago when they were defending national champion, and all that. Anyway, what else should we look for on allfortennessee.com? You got the grades coming out. What's the skinny? What should we be seeing here?
Well, we got our keys. We got our predictions again tomorrow. We've got our keys to this game and kind of your regular coverage of the week. I'm going to talk a little bit about, I will focus a little bit on this game, even though you're right. One interesting tidbit that I want to talk about is Dana Dimo, the UTEP coach, was at Wyoming when they played at Tennessee in 1999.
I was at that
coach
game.
There.
Yeah.
Yeah, he was the head coach, and that was a totally different type of Tennessee program, a much better program, obviously, Tennessee was. And Wyoming had a 10-7 lead in that game before their quarterback got hurt. If people forget that, that's one of the, as a young kid, that's one of the first games I remember watching.
I remember watching it, and what I remember is that you either had Tennessee gear on or you had on Wyoming gear. And almost always when you go to a game, you'll see somebody they want to rep, that they're watching the game, that they're from Ohio State, but they've got a ticket to this game, they're going to rep Ohio State. You almost always see that, right? And all that. There was none of that at Neyland. I never saw an environment. I remember in the 100,000 people there, I looked over and I thought I saw somebody wearing a Duke jersey legitimately like 5 sections away. I focused my binoculars. Nope, it was a Manning Colts jersey. There was, you were either wearing Wyoming or Tennessee in that game, and that says a lot about the Vols fan base. I think that his writing speaks for himself. Caleb Calhoun, all for Tennessee. Tri-City Sports Now, top of the order, we will be at the top of the order with Ken Hendricks from Knockahoma Nation talking about the future NL East champion Braves. Tri-City Sports Now. With that cocky statement right there, future champion, huh?
Yeah, that's a good one.